Alright, welcome back guys. So in this video we're now going to talk about basically entertainment theory, or basically we're going to look at the process for how people become entertained, and we're basically going to understand it from the perspective of the subconscious, right? So basically everything we've been talking about in the other videos, you're going to see that it's all still happening, right? When you're doing the normal things that entertain you, which could be like watching a movie, listening to music, reading a book, whatever, right? All these stuff I said, because you're basically feeling an emotion when you're being entertained by those things, you're going to see that all this stuff that I've been talking about basically is still happening even then, right? So yeah, we're really not even going to learn anything really new in this chapter. In this video. We're just going to kind of rehash some old concepts, but apply them in the circumstance of when you're being entertained. Now, before I move on, the main idea I'm trying to get at with this video, the things I talked about in this video, is that in the previous videos we've been talking about how to basically quantize your subconscious and get it to switch to a certain frequency on the basis of the intention you produce down to the command component or the command components. But we've been really thinking about it in terms of just kind of focusing on something in your mind and just kind of imagining things, right? But now we're going to look at how that process works when you're focused on things in the external world, right? So it all still happens the same way, but we're just going to apply it, we're just going to basically look at how it applies in the real world, which is mainly through the reflection principle. Excuse me. So the first thing I want to talk about, the first thing I like to do, like I said before, is I like hard theories, right? Hard definitions. So I like to define things very explicitly, in a very low-level way. So low-level is a computer programming term. So if you're not familiar with it, it basically just means computer programming, when something is very low level, it means it's expressed in a way that's very similar to machine language, or the language that computers can understand, which is basically just ones and zeros. So high level is when you express a command to a computer, or when you express a command in a program that people can understand, right? So like C++, C#, Java, those are programs that have high level programming, right? So they use little terms that people can understand, but you have to basically decompile it or translate it back into machine code so the computer can understand it. Which I don't know why I went into that whole explanation, but my point is I like a definition that's very, very clear cut, so I know what logically follows from it. So I feel the need to define entertainment, right? So most people might say entertainment is just when you're in a state where you're amused, right? Or where time passes quickly, right? And you're enjoying yourself or whatever. But for me, we're just going to say that entertainment is achieved when your subconscious is charged up at a positive or semi-positive frequency, right? So that's it, right? Now, semi-positive basically is just referring to danger frequency, right? So, and then positive frequency is just a frequency where the emotion on that frequency feels good. To be fair, this requires a slightly larger definition, which we're not really able to go into yet, because to really know what a positive and negative frequency is, it's more accurate to describe it in terms of the connection between your subconscious and God, right? But we're not really there yet, so for now we'll just say positive and semi-positive frequency. A positive frequency you can just think of as a frequency where the emotion you feel on that frequency feels good, right? So basically any activity that's entertaining you or that you feel entertained by is an activity where your subconscious is charging up at a positive or semi-positive frequency, right? So that's a good established definition of what entertainment is. And so basically we're going to look at how this is achieved from a subconscious level when you're doing regular activities that entertain you. So for the first one, we're going to look at movies, right? How movies entertain you from a subconscious perspective. Now, it basically is exactly what we said in previous videos. Like I said, there's not really a lot of new things we're going to learn in this video. But so in the previous videos, I said that your subconscious is quantized by your intention down to the three types of expression of the command component of the intention. Now, when you're expressing that in a more complex way. So that can include multiple different subjects, multiple different characters. Let's say you're doing it in your mind, right? It can include multiple different relationships. We basically just describe that by focusing on some scene in your mind and focusing on the context, right? As that context involves with time, it's basically like you're telling a story. So stories are really the way your subconscious likes to be told what to do. Now, when you're watching a movie, right, as a result of the reflection principle, you're basically just, people have a tendency, right, because they want to understand what's happening in the world around them, they have a tendency of producing intention that reflects what they're observing. So when you're watching a movie, the same thing basically happens. You're watching the movie, you're seeing what's going on, you're interpreting the scene and the story and the characters and their background histories and all of that stuff. And as you kind of observe those things, you're expressing an intention. You're expressing, your intention is expressing itself, expressing all of that information in its command components, right? So what you're seeing and hearing on screen is being expressed by the concrete component of your command. So even though you're physically hearing and seeing it or sensing it with your physical body, you're also imagining it at the same time. So if I hear a person saying something on screen, I have a tendency to imagine him saying that and hearing it in my mind at the same time. So that's the concrete component. The abstract component will just be the story, the background story, the characters, the history, their relationships to each other, everything going on. Even the desire component of the intention, right? The desire-based command component. So if I see a character hanging off a ledge and I don't want him to die, right? That's expressing a desire. That's a command component in the form of desire. So all of these things are being expressed as you're watching the movie. And what your intention's really doing, for the most part, is it's just reflecting the story that the movie's telling, right? And so, in other words, the movie, in a sense, it could kind of control your subconscious. In a sense, it controls your subconscious frequency based on the story that it's telling and how well it's telling that story through the audio and visuals too. And as long as you're paying attention, especially if you're paying a lot of attention to the movie, because like we said, the more attention you give something, the more powerful your subconscious response is going to be, right, toward intentions that are focused on that thing. So if you pay a lot of attention to the movie, which you're supposed to, right, and you're following along with the story basically, by virtue of the reflection principle, is basically controlling your subconscious, because your subconscious likes to be told what to do. It likes to be told what to do through stories. So we haven't talked too much about how the charging process works, but just know that, kind of what we said before, you can't turn your mind or you can't turn your conscious mind or your subconscious mind off. And as long as you can't think something that you're not paying attention to. So if you're paying attention to the movie, the reflection principle goes into place, and your subconscious pretty much has no choice but to charge on the basis of what's going on in the movie. So that, in a nutshell, is basically how movies influence your subconscious to charge, right? So different types of movies will tell different types of stories, and those will favor different types of subconscious charges, or different types of frequencies, really, for your subconscious to charge at, right? And that has to do with the absolute nature. So, for example, if I want to feel the danger that's not really a good example, because that could be applied to almost any story. But let's say I want to feel a sense of adventure, right? I want to feel a sense of action-adventure, right? So action-adventure movies would be a good genre of movies that tell the type of story to make me feel that action-adventure feeling, right? Now, a romance movie is not really going to get me that feeling that much. Why? Why can't I just watch a romance movie and feel like an action-adventure movie, right? It's nearly impossible to do that. The reason is because of the absolute nature, right? Like I said before, every story favors a certain frequency. And that's what we're going to learn to do once I start actually teaching you how to charge your subconscious. You're going to focus on what kind of story favors the frequency you want to charge. Movies follow the same principle, right? Action-adventure movies will get your subconscious to charge at a particular frequency related to action-adventure, right? Mystery movies will get your subconscious to charge in a way related to mystery. Suspense, horror, comedy, it's all the same, right? different stories favor different frequencies. And when you really break down why all of that is, it all comes back to what I said about the command components, right? The command components of your intention and the way they quantize the subconscious. And there's nothing you can do to change that. That relationship was made by God. So there's, you know what I mean? We have no control over it to change it, override it, or anything. And so it's an absolute relationship. And so music basically is the exact same thing. Going to this next point, when you're listening to music, what you're actually doing is the reflection principle is happening, and you're producing an intention that reflects basically what you're hearing. So when I physically hear, or my ears are sensing information from some song, right? It's sending information to my brain is sending it to my consciousness. My consciousness will still, it doesn't have to, but I generally still will, has a habit. I'll imagine the song in my head at the same time I'm physically hearing it. And my intention will express the concrete, which is the sound, but also the abstract components of the song, which I guess there are multiple abstract components, could be related to the lyrics. We haven't talked too much about the organizational pattern. That's important for music too. We probably talk a little bit more about that toward the end of the chapter. I think we might actually start talking a little bit about that type of stuff in the next couple videos. But anyway, you could basically just say that there's a certain pattern that certain genres of music have, down to their tempo, like how fast they are, the relationship between the drum patterns and the melodies they use and the instruments. See, we're not really in a position to talk about that stuff yet, but just know that they have basically a pattern that basically favors certain subconscious frequencies. So music in its own way, it's like telling a story, right? In fact, when I first started learning to make music myself, this was something I had to learn. I had to learn how to almost like tell a story through the music, right? And as I got better at doing that, I got much better at making music, right? Making beats, because that's the natural expression of music, is actually telling a story. Or I should say, let me back up a little bit. When I started to get better at making music, right, I learned that the main idea, what you're looking to do when you're making music, is you want to make sounds that evoke an emotional response out of a person, right? You know, the emotional response is like your compass. It's how you know where you're going with the song, or with the beat. If you if you weren't trying to evoke emotion, there would be almost no point to the music. You wouldn't know where to go from one moment to the next. Like it's completely meaningless if you're not trying to evoke emotion. So that's what I learned. Emotion's everything. That's entirely your compass for how you navigate your own beat and how you construct it. And so once I learned that, I started using my own emotional response to my music to kind of know, if this was a good melody, if it's a bad melody, or if I need to change the melody just a little bit to get that right emotional response. Sometimes it would take me days just to make it would be a tiny tweak, but I know like the melody is almost just right. But after a couple of days of just tweaking it, now it's perfect, because it evokes the proper emotional response out of me. It gets my subconscious switched to just the right frequency. So that's what I'm looking for. But anyway, as I started to understand that more about music, I started making music in a way that where everything I did was just focused on the emotional response that I got from it. And then eventually it was like I was just telling a story through the music, right? Which goes right back to here. You're entertained basically when your subconscious is charged up at a positive or semi-positive frequency, right? So you're not entertained if your subconscious is charged up at a negative frequency. So you're getting more and more and more angry while you're performing some activity. We wouldn't say you're entertained then. But if it's a positive or semi-positive frequency, you're entertained. And so music, the main goal with music is to evoke emotion. What that really means on the subconscious level is that the main goal is to control your subconscious frequency, right? And ensure that it charges up in a controlled way, right? And it does that through the reflection principle and by music organizing itself in a pattern that favors certain frequencies, which is basically, on a conscious level, that's basically the same as saying music works by telling a story. That'll make more sense for music, though, later when we talk about organizational patterns and we talk about subconscious forms and things like that. Because there are certain patterns, right? And I'll just say it now anyway, because we're going to get into it. There's certain patterns that the conscious mind can't see at all, right? But the subconscious mind can't. The subconscious mind can. Like, it's super easy, right, for the subconscious mind to pick up on certain patterns in nature that the subconscious mind is completely blind to. So music has a structure, organizational pattern, that's very easy for the subconscious mind to pick up on, right? So the subconscious could easily tell the difference, for example, between like an R&B song, or a rock song, or a dance song, or a love song, right? Or an epic song you might hear in a movie, right? Now the conscious mind would know of the difference through experience and maybe through definitions, but the subconscious would actually see the difference easily down to like, it almost has like a different shape to the subconscious, right? It's as easy as me telling the conscious mind telling the difference between like a square and a circle and a triangle. That's how precise the subconscious can perceive these things, right? And you know it on the level of intuition, which is also your subconscious. But again, we'll talk a little bit about that later. But yeah, basically this is the same thing. So different genres of music are the result of the absolute nature of the subconscious. Each different genres of music have different organizational patterns, or just patterns that are basically the same as telling a story. So each different type favors a different frequency. Songwriting is the same thing. For this one, now, I don't write songs, right? Never got into that. I'm sure I could do it, if I wanted to, especially with all this. I literally would just charge it up if I wanted to do that. But the reason I put this here is because I remember watching something on, I think it was Showtime. So it was Showtime with, it was like a Motown documentary, right? And to be fair, I never went back and to double check if it's true, because I also wrote this in the book. So hopefully it's true. I don't know. I never went back to double check it because that was years ago. But I remember watching this documentary on Showtime, and I'm pretty sure it was Jackie Robinson. He was saying how he learned, I forget who I think he said he learned it from someone else. I forget who it was. Was it? I don't remember. I think it was like the founder, owner of Motown. It was something like that. But anyway, he said he learned how to write songs, and he said he learned that writing a song was like telling a story. Now, that makes sense to me because that's completely consistent with everything I've been saying, right? Every form of entertainment is like telling a story to some degree because your subconscious likes its commands in the form of stories, right? And you're only entertaining what your subconscious is charging up, right? So I just thought that was interesting enough to write here. Good songs basically tell stories. In fact, if you think about it, when you're listening to music, right? When you're listening to a song you really like and you're really into, you may even notice that your mind just starts randomly playing a story, right? It's like a music video in your mind, right? Like it's just a story just starts playing out. Why is that happening? Well, first of all, that's transcendental imagination, like I said before. So your mind gets really sucked into some fantasy and your imagination. And your imagination feels much more real, right? And that's happening because your subconscious is charged up, right? At the same time, that's why you feel a lot of emotion also. But it also happens because like I said, stories are the natural means by which your subconscious likes to take commands. It's also the natural means by which your subconscious expresses itself, which you see like when you're dreaming. We're going to talk more about subconscious thought though in the next chapter, and it'll make a little more sense then. But even just going to this next point, sporting events are also more entertaining when they have a backstory. So even sports, right? The backstory of sports or the history. Let's say you're watching two rival teams play. That's a lot more exciting, right? When there's a lot on the line than watching two teams who you don't know about play. There's no championship on the line. No one cares, right? This is just far less interesting, right? The backstory represents the abstract command component, right, of the sporting event, and that helps your subconscious to switch to a certain frequency or become quantized, right? So this is important too. I remember like me, I watch boxing. So boxing is kind of my sport. The fight between a good fight that had a really good backstory was Crawford versus Spence, Errol Spence. So that's one of my favorite fights because Terence Crawford is one of my favorite fighters. Him, Andre Ward, Anthony Joshua, Triple G, like those are some of my favorite fighters over the last couple of years. But that was such an amazing fight for. Really, it's not really that important now. But when I say Terence Crawford was in the zone, like I remember I said in the previous videos that I can just tell like when a fighter's in the zone. I just know, right? I know it. I can look at people and know what frequency their subconscious is on. I almost know what emotion they're feeling. I've just been doing this too long, right? And you'll pick up on it too. Because like I said, your subconscious can see these things easily, right? You're just not always aware of what's happening on a conscious level. But I've been doing this so long that like, I feel like Terence Crawford, like he was so in the zone during that fight. It was just amazing to watch. Because like I said before, the zone, and we'll talk about this in chapter 13, but the zone has levels to it. You could go deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And when you go deeper into it, everything gets more instinctive, right? You're just acting on pure instinct. And that's what Crawford was doing. It was just amazing. The way he's moving. Right? Because remember what I said. When you're in the zone, or when your subconscious is charged up and you're in the zone, you're also using transcendental control. So you move your body using your positive mind. And the way he's moving it has so much finesse. It's so smooth, right? And which is exactly how I described transcendental control. You can't move your body like that using your negative mind. It just doesn't have that type of control over your body. But anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent. That was an amazing fight, right? If you haven't watched it, you should watch it, right? It's a textbook case of what happens when a fighter is in the zone, how they look, how they move, their ability to calculate things, their ability to react. But anyway, that fight had a good backstory. So it had a lot of it was very interesting because of the backstory. Because Terence Crawford, I think at the time he only had one belt, which was the WBO belt. A major world title belt. And Errol Spence had the WBA, the WBC, and the IBF. And they've been kind of on the trajectory to face each other for years, right? And you know this stupid thing they do in boxing where it's like they always got to build up or let it marinate was the stupid term that I guess came from the situation with Mayweather and Pacquiao. And because it kind of worked out, at least for Mayweather and Pacquiao in terms of their money, other fighters started copying that and following the marination type of strategy to make more money. And so they were kind of doing that. I mean, Terence Crawford wasn't. Like, he wanted to fight. I'm not convinced Errol Spence wanted to fight. Or to be fair, I'm not convinced Errol Spence's managers wanted him to fight right away. But anyway, they were on the same path for years, right? And they were talking trash at each other too, but they both looked really, really good in all their fights. And so there was so much of a backstory to it, right? And also, even the part of the story adds the chance of loss or risk, which that enhances the danger frequency, which charges by the body. So that's when you get for free, and that charges really, really easily because it comes from the body. And the danger frequency comes in from the fact that when they finally fight, they're risking their reputation. The reputation that took them years to build up, right? They're both known as they were both undefeated fighters. I don't even think they had a draw, right? They were just completely undefeated. And they were both really good, and it was hard to imagine them even losing, it was hard to imagine them losing a fight, let alone getting knocked out, let alone losing their belt or belts, right, in the case of Errol Spence. And so that risk, right, also plays into the context of the fight. And so when you're watching a fight like that and you're producing intention that reflects the context you're observing, it can cause your subconscious to move around and switch to a whole bunch of different frequencies and charge up at those frequencies. So anyway, I say all of that to say that's basically one of my favorite fights of all time. It was an amazing fight. Like I said, it's a textbook case of a fighter being in the zone. And I don't even think Errol Spence was fully healthy that night. But it was just made so much worse by the fact that Errol Spence wasn't even healthy, but Terrence Crawford was extremely in the zone. It's hard to get that in that zone like that if you don't know what you're doing. I mean, if you know what you're doing, it's pretty easy. But if you don't know what you're doing, it's hard to get in the zone. It's rare in boxing for fighters to get that in the zone. When a fighter does, it's usually going to be a bad night for the other guy, right? But anyway, that's why I kind of get excited for that fight. But yeah, so sporting events, when they have a backstory, they're more exciting, right? Because the subconscious likes stories, right? It likes to be commanded in the form of stories. These last ones, I wonder, should I even go over these? Good singers. This one isn't too important, but this one I say good singers are able to use their voice like an instrument. This is really just a play on what I was saying about how each instrument represents a different frequency, right? So if, let's say I play, like I said before, if I play a melody on a guitar and I imagine that melody in my head, or if I play a melody, that same exact melody on a piano and I imagine that melody in my head, to hear the sound that I'm hearing in my own imagination, my subconscious has to be on a certain frequency. So it alters my perception to hear the sound in my head, and it has to be on a frequency to hear that particular sound. And so not only do instruments affect the frequency of our subconscious, just by their uniqueness of their sound and through the reflection principle, but so does our own voice, because our voice itself is like an instrument. And so what I noticed as I started to learn more about the subconscious and I started to learn more about music is I noticed that a good singer will be able to, they'll know what songs kind of, how do I want to word it? They'll know what songs their voice sort of brings to life. And what I mean by that is exactly what I was saying about music. Music, the goal of music is to emotionally move you. It's to stimulate you emotionally, to make you feel some emotion very strongly. A person's voice is exactly the same thing, right? And a certain melody, it might sound stupid on one instrument, but sound amazing on another instrument, right? It's just more emotionally moving on that instrument than the other instrument. That other instrument will have to look for different melodies to really be brought to life on that instrument. So singers, certain songs might sound stupid for a certain person to sing because of their voice, and another song would sound amazing using that person's voice, right? So a good singer will always try to look for the proper song that their voice brings to life. Some singers don't understand that, and they just sing random songs that sounds terrible, right? Excuse me. When I'm making beats, I'll hear certain melodies and I'm like, oh, that sounds horrible. But as I got enough experience to say, it sounds horrible in this instrument, but I know another instrument will probably sound good, right? It could bring it to life. But yeah, if I just played certain melodies just on any random instrument, the music would sound terrible. And some singers don't understand that, right? But yeah, that's just something I learned. This stuff isn't too important now. Good performers able to use context, performance. That's more of a thing related to organizational patterns. I don't know that I want to talk about that yet. One thing I'm going to mention here, though, is this really ties into here, but yeah. Anyway, I'm sort of thinking if I want to talk about this now. Yeah, I guess I could use this. So another thing I kind of learned, I learned the difference between a performer and a singer, right? And so what's the difference? Lots of singers perform too. They're not mutually exclusive. Well, they're not, but I've learned that a lot of singers, they almost act like they are, right? Because a lot of singers, when they get on stage and they sing, and let's say they can sing really good, they'll think that singing is the same as performing. And it isn't, right? For the exact reason I said. A good singer could probably sing a song really well, but it's not emotionally moving. It doesn't accomplish this first principle to make them feel something emotionally. Some songs will, some songs won't. That's why you have to find the right song that your voice brings to life. And not a lot of singers don't realize that. But the performers do realize that, right? Not only do they find the right song that their voice fits, right? Good performers will also even move on stage in a certain way. They'll wear certain fancy suits, right? Or fancy sort of outfits for their stage performance, right? They have certain special effects on stage, and the stage itself might look like a certain type of environment, but they move and they dance in certain ways. And what all of it's doing is telling a story, right? It's creating context. And the way that context evolves with time is the same as telling a story. So good performers are able to tell a story while they're singing, right? And that is entertaining, right? So this is very important. I've seen, I might put the link to this video. I forgot I could do that. But I might put the link to this video of something I saw, I think it was X Factor, was it? It was just a video of singers who were great performers. Some of them weren't even that good of a singer, right? They weren't great singers, but they were amazing performers, right? And it didn't matter that they weren't good singers, because what you really wanted is to be entertained, right? To be entertained, all you need is to be charged up at a positive or semi-positive frequency. To do that, the performer has to tell a story, right? Because the subconscious is responsible for charging charging up at a positive or semi-positive frequency. And to get the subconscious to do that, you have to command it to in the form of a story, right? Like I said, your subconscious likes stories. So performers know how to tell a story while they're on stage, and it's kind of amazing to watch, right? So yeah, I think I'm gonna link that video, and I want you to just think about these principles while you see these performers, right? In the I think the last point here, a good example of that, or a lot of these principles that I saw. So it was two of them. So I remember years ago I saw this performance from this chick named Ashley Williams, right? So she was on X Factor. This was in I think it was 2013. I mean, I didn't watch it in 2013, but I noticed it on YouTube. But I think it was from 2013, right? So she sung this song by Whitney Houston. It was like the most amazing performance, right? That one of the most amazing performances that I've ever seen. And like the whole crowd was like shocked at how good she was, right? Like even the judges too. But in all of it, like I said, I've been doing this long enough where I can just look at something like that and know exactly what's going on the subconscious level. So I'm gonna link this video. I'm gonna link that video too to this one, and so you guys can watch it and kind of see what I'm talking about, just to understand more about the subconscious. So during that during that performance, what she did is exactly what I did. She charged her subconscious. She might not have been aware of it, but she charged her subconscious to feel more emotion while she sang, right? And so her subconscious was charged. We haven't talked about charging for performance yet, but it was charged up relative to that activity, right? And she felt a lot of emotion while she sang. Now, unlike me, she's actually a good singer, right? So that allowed her to use her other transcendental mental abilities. So not only could she sing even more amazing, right, than she normally would be able to, in other words, she had transcendental control of her voice, right? So it just, oh man, like she was able to sing so much better because she was using transcendental control. But on top of that, the way she moves her body, the way she inflects her voice, you can see her projecting emotion and mood, the way she controls the way she says the words, right, down to even the timing of certain parts of the word, right? All of it results in a kind of pattern. Like I said before, the subconscious can pick up on those patterns. We'll talk more about that a little later, but all of it kind of came together in a way that told a story, right? And that made her performance so much more emotionally moving. It was amazing. Like everyone was amazed by it. But I'm like, that's what happens when you're using transcendental performance. That's what happens when you charge up your subconscious at a proper frequency, right? You're able to move in a way that has the proper pattern, in this case, or for now we'll just say, tells the proper story that gets your subconscious to respond. Again, for like the 100th time, your subconscious likes stories, right? And another example of that was, I don't know how many people into this, but Lox versus Dipset. So they had a versus battle a couple years ago, right? And Jadakiss is on the Lox, for people who don't know. So he was so in the zone that night, right? And like I said 100 times now too, I can tell, once I can look at a person and tell what frequency they're on. I can tell when they're in the zone. I can tell all of that. And he was definitely in the zone. The way he's moving, the way he's speaking, right? The timing, the way he inflects his voice. In other words, his delivery, right, is the word I'm looking for. Remember what I said, delivery, the information about the delivery when you're performing is included inside your compulsion. That's a part of the organizational pattern, which again we'll talk about later. But that all is incorporated into the compulsion. So because he's charged up at a certain frequency, his transcendental creativity is also charged up. So that's what's helping him to, not the transcendental control is helping him for the delivery, but knowing how to, what to deliver or what way to move that reflects the delivery, that's coming from his transcendental creativity. And so he was just so in the zone, right, that it enhanced his performance. But through his performance, he's able to tell the story, which he's already telling a story really through the songs he's sang on stage and that he's in the lyrics he's reciting, but he's able to deliver it so much better. So the story is so much more believable. There's so much more context to it in the way he's moving and the way he's selling it through his delivery, right? And so that made his performance just so much more amazing. Now, Dipset, that night they were very flat, which is exactly how we describe the negative mind. They're performing using their negative mind, not their positive mind. The Lox was using their positive mind, and especially Jadakiss, but all of them were, right? I could tell, right? In Dipset, they're like the Lox, their performance they had that night is not a performance they can easily have every night, right? They just had that magic that night, right? The performance Dipset had, they could easily perform anytime, right? Why? Because a negative mind can always, negative or normal performance level is always a level of performance you can have any time for anything, and you can perform that way as much as you want to, right? It's easy to come across. The downside is that it's not that impressive. So that's another good example to see, not only to see someone who's in the zone, right, but also to see someone, to see like how the way they move and the way they add context to their performance helps to tell a story. And you're going to notice that emotionally moves you, right? It gets your subconscious to start charging. So yeah, that's basically it. There is one other thing I wanted to talk about. So, this is probably more something that's going to be important later in the spiritual topic, which is book 2. But for now, something I think is important to say, and we're going to talk a little bit more about a related topic toward the end of the chapter. But music also, including movies too, but music also can be positive or negative, right? So that's there's like a misunderstanding about music, which is like, let's say I hear music that's talking about drugs, it's talking about like sex, it's like illicit sex, what's the word? Licentious behavior or promiscuous behavior. It's talking about drinking, in gang violence and things like that. So there's this idea that you can have a song like that, and yet the song is positive, or it's like your opinion that it's negative, right? It's in the eye of the beholder. No, it's not, right? I guarantee you it's absolutely not in the eye of the beholder. Music like that is negative, right? It doesn't matter how much you don't want it to be negative, it's negative by definition. And it's not by my definition, that's by God's definition. God's the one who determined what good is and what bad actually is, right? This is a problem that, we're going to talk more about that a little later in the chapter. But for now, I just want to say that no, you cannot have a song that talks about these things, and is considered positive, right? Not only is it negative, it's going to drop your frequency. It's completely going to lower your subconscious frequency. Now, we haven't talked about what lower and higher mean in terms of your relationship to God, because that's the full definition. But for now, just know that negative frequencies feel bad, right? So, or a lower frequency basically means a negative frequency, and it's going to feel bad. So yes, music has the ability to increase your frequency or lower your frequency, right? And there's a lot of negative songs out there. In my opinion, most songs on the radio. Well, no, I won't say. I think it's changed in recent years. I don't listen to the radio. But a lot of songs on the radio absolutely lower your frequency. And they also contain subliminal messages that plant thoughts in your subconscious to help you, that cause your frequency to drop. I'm familiar with all of these things. We haven't talked too much about that yet. That's going to make a little more sense when we talk about subconscious memory in chapters 9 and 10. And then when we talk more about how the subconscious charges. But we're really going to get more into stuff like that probably in the spiritual chapters of the book. Especially chapter 5 of book 2. But anyway, I wanted to just kind of throw that out there early, right? So right now, because I don't know why people think that, right? I think of everything in terms of the subconscious, so I forget what it's like not to think in these terms, as I've been thinking in these terms for years. But I just think that people need to understand that, yes, music can be negative, right? It lowers your frequency. Negative movies lower your frequency. That's a big one too. TV lowers all these things lower your frequency. You don't really notice it that much because you don't know how to connect to God, right? I hate to say this, but yeah, a lot of people don't. It's not that they don't have a strong relationship with God, although I think a lot of people don't, but they don't understand these things on the subconscious. They don't understand the metaphysics of this stuff. When you're used to connecting to God and feeling like you're in the presence of God and you're in the presence of Jesus, then you're going to notice just how negative all of this stuff is. And you're going to notice that the more you move to Jesus Christ, the more you're moving away from all of this garbage, right? There's no way you're going to feel like you're in the presence of Jesus while listening to a lot of modern music and a lot of modern entertainment, and because it's constantly charging your frequency, or it's constantly lowering your subconscious frequency. It's causing it to charge at a negative frequency. You have to move away from it, right? So that it discharges. And when you start charging your subconscious to move closer to God, then you're going to notice like what real positivity feels like. And it feels amazing. And then you're going to be like, oh, now I know kind of why that was all so dark. But I'm so used to it that I kind of forget that I don't think everyone kind of has that reference frame or that reference point of positivity of connecting to God. Which, like I said, I've been doing that for years. So I don't know. Anyway, I forget what it's like to not do those things. But I feel like, based on what I see, a lot of people aren't really that familiar with what it's like to feel close to God, right? Metaphysically, not like figuratively. Like when you can actually metaphysically increase your connection to God, and it feels amazing. You actually feel the presence of God more and more and more, right? And it's an amazing, wonderful feeling. But yeah, I wanted to just say that for now, but we'll get more into that, more of that later. But in the next video, I think we're going to move on. We're going to start talking about, it's kind of a complex topic, but I think it's important to speak about. We're going to talk about subconscious forms, right? Which is, we're going to talk about where opinions come from, right? So why can I have, if based on what I'm saying, right, the subconscious has an absolute response, and everyone's subconscious responds the exact same way to certain intentions and certain things they see due to the reflection principle, why are there varied opinions on how certain things are perceived? Well, we're going to go into that, and to kind of understand that more, I think it's useful to talk about what I call subconscious forms. So again, that might be a little complicated for some people, but if you can understand it, then you're going to understand the subconscious so much better, right? So yeah, we're going to go into that next video and then in for the rest of the chapter, right? So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.